I have three learning goals for our time here together. Number one is that I hope that you'll leave this webinar with some confidence in approaching your Republican or Democratic member in this new 119th Congress. I hope you'll leave with some greater clarity on CCL's strategic approach to legislation in this Congress. And I hope you'll be able to list some of the ways in which the context has shifted for this Congress from the last Congress, the one that we just left. I'm hoping to impart these three learning goals with this agenda. So I'll first address the question of why have this training now. Then I'll review some of the tenets of CCL's strategy, highlight some ways that the context has changed in important ways that affect our approach, how you can engage with your members of Congress. Then I'll wrap it up with some conclusions, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A and discussion at the end. So first of all, why this training now? Well, first of all, I think that it's important to highlight what CCL is trying to accomplish this early in the Congress. The early CCL priorities are, number one, defending the clean energy provisions in reconciliation. Number two, moving the Fix Our Forest Act. And number three, supporting carbon border measures. Now you might be saying, wait, what about permitting reform? Where has that gone? Well, that's still a priority, but that's a longer term priority. Just one of the things that shifted with this new Congress, permitting reform was front and center, something that was really trying to move forward at the end of the last Congress. And with the shift, permitting reform has dropped off the priority list of Congress. So we are adapting to that reality. But when it spins back up, CCL will be right there again. I want to highlight a couple of things about this different context for CCL. The first priority is IRA defense. I just want to highlight that this is really the first time in CCL's history that it has tried to play defense. Prior to this, we've really only been playing offense. And what I mean by offense versus defense in this context, offense is trying to pass new bills. This is the first time where we're trying to defend a bill that has already been passed. And so this is really something new for CCL. There are different ways of approaching defense of a policy as opposed to offense trying to pass new policies. Another thing that's changed, we are engaging on permitting reform and policies like the Fix Our Forest Act. That shifts our targets with Democrats, perhaps being harder to get on board. So I think a lot of people in this organization have been used to Republicans being the tougher ones to get on board. And with support for these policies, I think that shifts a little bit. And it's important to recognize that and think about how to address that. But so far, we appear to be doing pretty well on the defense, defending those clean energy provisions, at least as measured by CCL popping up in major news publications. So you have headlines here in order. The top is the New York Times, and then you have E&E Daily. That's a trade publication owned by Politico. And then down below here, you have The Guardian. CCL comes up in all of these, and they've highlighted CCL as a key organization speaking to Republicans. And so when you're getting noticed by publications of this caliber, I mean, that suggests you're doing something right. And I want to thank the volunteers for doing the hard work to get noticed here. It's really your hard work that is making this happen. So thank you. We also have a different balance of power. As Ricky highlighted in the introduction, President Trump is in the White House again as the 47th president sworn in to the United States. There are narrow majorities in both the Senate and the House, with Republicans in control of both. In the Senate, Republicans hold a 53 to 47 seat majority. That's a switch from last Congress. Democrats held the majority in the last Congress. In the House, Republicans hold a 220 to 215 Republican majority. And that's the same, but it's a little bit narrower than it was in the last Congress. This means that Republicans determine what comes up for a vote. One of the reasons why it's an advantage to hold the majority in the Senate or the House is that you get to determine the schedule. And if you don't want to schedule something, then you don't. So that's a pretty blunt thing that you need to wrap your head around as you think about strategy and how to approach how to approach strategically Congress is Republicans determine what comes up for a vote, top to bottom. Bringing this down a little bit more in the Senate, with that breakdown that Republicans are 7 votes shy of being able to break a filibuster. So that means really the only thing that can move forward without bipartisan support is reconciliation. And so that's why already we're seeing all this discussion about moving things forward with reconciliation. Everything else has to be bipartisan. In the House, as I mentioned, this is a smaller majority than the last Congress. Republicans can afford to lose 3 votes. And so lose, in that context, it means they vote no. So they could vote present, and then you can get slightly different numbers. But if they vote no different than the majority, then nothing passes. And if it's a tie, it doesn't pass in the House. You need a majority to pass something in the House. Another thing to be cognizant of is that in the House, Republicans relied on Democrats to pass major legislation, must pass legislation multiple times in the last Congress. And so that was just a dynamic that happened. So far, it's been different this Congress. We will see if that continues. But even under the speakership of Mike Johnson last Congress, he had to rely on Democratic votes to pass a lot of bills. There's also a different tone in American politics, just overall. You've all noticed it. And I just want to highlight a couple of things. Number one is that it just takes more energy to execute in the CCL way. You have to work a bit harder to find that common ground, to find that appreciation, to show respect. And some of you may be noticing that there really is feeling like there's more uncertainty in how Congress is operating and how you should relate to them. And I just want to say that that's real. It's not just you. This is a really uncertain time. There's a lot up in the air. So if you feel uncertainty, you're not alone. So now let's look at the tenets of CCL strategy and how CCL is going to approach this moment in time. And I think the most important thing to highlight first is thinking ahead. Uh, we think across multiple Congresses, multiple swings of the pendulum. And so by swing of the pendulum, I mean Democratic control, Republican control. Um, we want to have impact in all constellations of Congress, whether Democrats have unified control, Republicans have unified control, whether it's a divided Congress. We want to make sure that CCL volunteers can go into their meetings and move the ball forward. However, this does involve some trade-offs. So right now, things are looking good. This is a moment that CCL is very well suited for because we have these relationships on both sides of the aisle. And so that stands out. Major news publications are noticing. It's a sharp contrast with other environmental groups. They don't have those relationships. And so this is an environment that CCL is very well suited to. But a trade-off would be if Democrats had unified control. We still have good relationships with Democratic members, but there are environmental groups that have bet entirely on moving things through Congress only when Democrats have control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And when that happens, Democratic leadership is probably going to listen to those groups who have been with them the entire time more than they are a group like CCL, who is always wanting to talk with everybody and have positive relationships. So even though we are preparing for multiple swings of the pendulum, there are trade-offs, but we're comfortable with those trade-offs. Volunteer empowerment is also a key part of our strategy. We always want you to be able to have a good meeting with your member of Congress. We always want you to be able to move something forward. And so this is part of having multiple pieces of legislation that we're supporting that have a different appeal to different members of Congress. And a lot of times we hear from volunteers, well, my member of Congress isn't going to move anything we support forward. Even if it's just our reputation as a good group to work with, going in there and being able to show appreciation and respect, that works on our reputation. And remember that staffers move around so much that that staffer may end up somewhere else. And if they had a previous good experience with CCL, well, that's also moving the ball forward. Another element of volunteer empowerment is we don't want a bad meeting to be because of what we are asking you to do. And what I mean by that, this really gets back to focus. CCL is very, very focused on climate. And part of the reason we are so focused is because if we branched out and talked about a lot of other different things, at a certain point, you're going to get to something that people disagree with more than they disagree with our positions on the climate. And that could lead to a bad meeting. They could say, hey, you have this position on healthcare and we don't agree with it. And so we're not going to talk to you. Well, that would be a problem. So there are other ways in which we try really hard to make sure that you can have a good meeting. But that's an example of how focus is an example of how a volunteer empowerment. We are also a science-based organization. And what the science is telling us is that we are at a point of uncomfortable trade-offs because our climate impacts are here and they're now. And unfortunately, Congress didn't listen to us earlier. And so now we've wasted time. And so what I mean by uncomfortable trade-offs is a good example would be putting down renewables, siting renewables or transmission lines that impacts the environment in that local area, even if it is a win for the climate, that's an uncomfortable trade-off. And I think that a lot of groups are not fully grappled with this, and a lot of members of Congress have not fully grappled with this. We're out of solutions that are completely squishy, comfy, cozy, without consequences. Uh, Even though different groups do have a different approach, we still value this. Different theories of change will lead to different emphases for different groups. And a theory of change is kind of jargon, but it's something that is in the NGO world. And it's just how you think what you're doing is going to result in the change you envision. So, for example, CCL's theory of change is very focused on Congress. It's very focused on volunteers. Other groups may have a theory of change that's more focused on the courts. It's more focused using lawyers. And so they're going to prioritize different things that are still valuable, still important. And CCL, with our theory of change, is going to prioritize other things. It's all valuable. It all adds together, and it's good to have a diversity of approaches, a diversity of theories of change moving forward, because you really never know what's going to happen that makes one much more effective than the others at a key moment. We're also keeping our eyes on the prize. Our government, both sides of the aisle, has not really grappled with the true extent of the problem on climate change. I think that they need people who are taking the science and bringing it to them and reminding of them of the urgency of this issue of climate that we all see and is what brings us all here today. CCL is also constituent driven. Now, we are not unique in being constituent driven, but we are perhaps unique in combining the degree to which our constituents, you, are empowered within our organization and the longevity that this organization has had. And let me give you an example of what I mean by that. I had a conversation recently with someone who has been in the DC space, the climate NGO space, for a long time. He was having conversations with Mark and Marshall in 2008, 2009 about his organization, totally separate, becoming the youth arm of CCL. And we just happened to reconnect a couple weeks ago, and he was observing to me, Danny, it's really amazing how long CCL has been able to exert the level of influence that it has for as long as it has. Because in that time, since I was having those conversations with Mark and Marshall, there are a lot of groups who are grassroots who've come and then they've gone, but CCL is still there. And so I think that I really appreciated that perspective because while he's been involved with CCL and in parallel, he never, there was not that merger. He did not start the youth arm of the CCL. He always went his own way. And so I value that outside perspective and that compliment really. And also, big numbers are evidence of our success. Big numbers of meetings, people who were able to get to call, the pieces we're able to publish. It's really difficult to get these things in the numbers we are. Very few groups can pull that off, and with the consistency that CCL has because of this strategic investment in being a constituent-driven organization. Now let's drill down a little bit further on how the contexts have changed. We looked at some of the mechanics, but how do those mechanics play out? Well, CCL has a history of success. It's not just those articles that I highlighted. Uh, we have been here before. The last time Republicans held both the House and the Senate, as well as the presidency, was 2017 to 2018. And again, it's worth stating again, the only things that are going to move are things that Republicans are going to be supporting, that they prioritize to schedule on the agenda. In the first Trump presidency, CCL still helped pass three bills: the Climate Ready Fisheries Act, the BEST Act, which had to do with battery storage, and the Use It Act, which had to do with carbon dioxide removal. All of those three bills passed on December 21st, 2020, as part of a coronavirus relief and omnibus package. So we have had success in previous Trump presidencies. We can do this. We've done it before. And the way we got those bills passed was with this respectful, appreciative engagement over time, starting in 2017 and 2018. And then what we did, what you did, is you built champions within Congress who are advocating for these bills, the Climate Ready Fisheries Act, the BEST Act, and the Use It Act, from the inside, so that when there was a vehicle, a must-pass bill, they were saying, let's put this bill that I worked on, and I know it has constituent support in this bill. And that's how we were able to pass. That's why those three very different acts passed all in one day. It was a result of really 4 years of effort to get those by you working in tandem with the DC team to coordinate with the sponsors and the co-sponsors to figure out what would have the most impact. MAGA, Make America Great Again. The movement is different this time around. It's different than in Trump's first term. It's different from the campaign. And what we are seeing right now is very strong unity across the party. In public, as I mentioned, in the House, we have seen Republicans passing on party line votes, spending bills that they didn't pass without Democratic support in the last Congress. So that is a shift. But that isn't to say that there are current concerns being expressed by Republicans to Republican leadership. They're just doing that behind closed doors, because to do it in public would make it less likely that their mutual goals are able to move forward. So if you have concerns about what Republicans are doing, it's important to keep in mind concerns are being voiced by Republicans now to their leadership. They're just doing it in a way that is respectful of their majority and trying to preserve the political capital that they have to move things forward. Democrats are also different. They learned some hard lessons from the last election. Some examples here include having to reckon with incorrect assumptions about demography as destiny. Demography as destiny was the thought that because minority populations in the United States are growing, because you always have young people, that they were always going to be Democratic voters. And what you saw in the last election was you saw a very large movement of minority populations voting for Republicans, voting for Trump, and young people voting for Trump, especially young men. And so that really, I think, so that was an incorrect assumption. It was bottom line, it was lazy to assume that demography is destiny. And I think the Democrats are reevaluating that. Certainly, the Democrats are reckoning with a DEI backlash. This is top priority for the Trump administration, and that's having a lot of consequences and really changing. It's really just changing the fabric of society, and so Democrats are reckoning with that. They're more focused on inflation. I think that a lot of Democrats view that as a big miss in the campaign, is by not focusing on inflation, not taking those concerns seriously enough. A lot of people have expressed surprise at the relative silence of Democrats early in the Trump presidency. It's almost 3 months that he's been since he was sworn in on January 20th. Almost 3 months, not quite. But that's been a strategic choice. I believe that Nancy Pelosi used the colorful term, let them stew in their own juices. And so that's in part been a choice, but we also appear to be reaching the end of that choice last week. There was an article about Democrats launching an aggressive media strategy to coordinate non-traditional messengers and get on shows that they wouldn't are not mainstream media. A critique that I've heard a lot about the Harris campaign was her choosing not to go on Joe Rogan, for example. And it was pretty clear reading about this more aggressive media strategy that they are going to be going on podcasts, going social media. They're going to be trying to do that. So these are examples of how Democrats are different, and it's important to grapple with how they've changed moving forward. And I think we should also just think about all the crazy stuff that can happen with majorities this narrow. Example one is you have three Republican House members who are stuck in a really bad traffic jam while carpooling to vote. If they don't get there and all Democrats are present and they vote against the Republican policy, it fails. Just three House members carpooling. That's it. It doesn't work. Another example is that Democrats don't vote with Johnson to fund the government, as they did in September, and this again forces 100% agreement among House Republicans. We've already seen this, as I mentioned, and I think it's put, in particular, Freedom Caucus Republicans in a tough spot. They are voting differently than they did, and they need to explain that. And there's not a really comfortable explanation for that, and it puts a lot of pressure on House Republicans that I think is adding up. In example three, this is one that I've mentioned before. You need 60 votes in the Senate to pass everything except reconciliation, and Republicans are 7 votes short. So bipartisanship is not dead. For a lot of what Congress has to do, bipartisanship still has to be the order of the day. So those are some examples of how crazy stuff can happen with majorities this small. So now let's talk about how to engage. How are you going to engage with your member of Congress? Well, in talking with Jen, we thought it made sense to divide members of Congress into 4 groups, 2 Republican groups and 2 Democratic groups. For Republicans, we thought we could divide this into Senate and House Republicans. And for Democrats, we thought it made more sense to use the terms rank and file and progressive, either in the House or the Senate. We'll start with Republicans. And just a top line message, 9 times out of 10, the best opener in your meeting will be the economy, jobs, and global competition. Those 3 themes are what we use to frame the asks for the conservative conference that was just last month. And the reports from those meetings are that these worked very well. So if you're meeting with a Republican, start by thinking about the economy, jobs, and global competition and framing your messages through those lenses. So for Senate Republicans, you can expect thoughtful and nuanced conversations. We're not expecting you to have major problems with these offices, and you should be prepared for detailed policy discussions. Part of this is just structural, senators having 6-year terms as opposed to 2 in the House. Also, Senate offices have more money than House offices, so they can hire staff for longer. They can hire more staff with more niche expertise, and they can keep them on for longer. So that's part of the reason why we expect this out of Senate Republicans. In the House, again, just having this 9 out of 10 times, the best opener will be the economy, jobs, and global competition, because it's such a good, if that's one thing you remember about engaging with Republicans, this is a good thing to remember. House Republicans, I think you'll see more chaos and frustration, and that's because they have 2-year terms, and as soon as they get elected, they're already thinking about their next election. They don't have as much money. They're really crammed in there. It's just more chaotic. MAGA discussions, this is where we hear a lot from volunteers about frustration, not being able to move the relationship with the member down the road. But again, remember that education builds our reputation with the staffer when they go to another office, and it shows the member of Congress that there are climate advocates who are respectful. Again, part of the reason why those news outlets are picking up CCL is because this method of engaging stands out so much. There just aren't that many other organizations who are climate organizations who are able to get these meetings and have these positive meetings in this case, on defense of the IRA tax credits. There are moderate Republicans still there, but they don't have the heft to stand alone as they have formerly. There aren't as many of them, at the moment. And so, but they are still there, and that's important to keep in mind. For Democrats, with rank and file Democrats, bipartisanship is very on brand for them, so we don't anticipate large problems or working with them. For progressives, as mentioned at the top of this presentation, with some of the priorities like permitting reform and the Fix Our Forests, how do you approach them? I think emphasizing the urgency of now. Wildfires are happening now, and this is impacting their constituents. And so it's really important to we have to act now. Those uncomfortable trade-offs that the science is saying we need to take. And I think it's really telling how many Western Democrats are co-sponsors of the Fix Our Forests Act, those who have to deal with wildfires. So that's why I bring that up. Emphasizing that CCL's positions are science-based, the durability of bipartisanship. A lot of progressives bipartisanship is more of an afterthought, but bipartisanship is durable. And I think that emphasizing that durability and how that's important to you as a constituent will be helpful in these meetings. And when you're meeting with the progressive office, you should just expect more conversations about the administration and talk to your team about how you might address topics that come up. And I would remind you about focus and how that is an important tool that we feel empowers our volunteers in the long run. So to conclude, CCL strategy centers on volunteer empowerment and influence in any given Congress. The current context is very different from the last Congress, and it's marked by extremely thin margins into which weird things can happen. Though it is more difficult to employ the CCL way in our meetings, we're going to do it anyway. We still want you to show appreciation and respect. There are short and long-term benefits to continuing to engage members. We want to reap both the short-term and the long-term benefits. And considering the context your member is operating in can lead to more impactful meetings. So thinking about what they're thinking about with other priorities and how that might impact what you're about to talk with them, that can lead to more impactful meetings.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration.
Like what you hear? Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well.
And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.